All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little bit more Q&A. If you run out of Q, then I will find some more answers just to tell you. Some more of the A, because I have plenty of talks in here. But this is the one thing you can't do when I'm not here. You can't ask me questions. So you can read my material, you can go and read up on any question you want to read up on, but you can't ask me. So that's why we're doing a lot of Q&A. Also, as I said, if I don't know something, I'm not going to try to make something up. I'll just let you know I don't know, okay? So if I don't know an area, just to be honest with you. And then please make your... Also, you've been very good about asking me questions, but let's keep on that. Make your question a question. Sometimes people get up and they give us a lecture. But in order for everybody to get questions answered, just make sure you made it a question. And then after Q&A, I'll pray, and we'll be all wrapped up.
Okay. The first question was sent to us in the first Q&A session. It's via Twitter, so it should pop up on the screen, so you can read it.
Okay, so if my translator wants to translate, well, I say, since atheists don't often accept the Bible, what sources do you use to answer others on-the-spot questions to you? That's a great question. The interesting thing about this question is I typically don't start with the Bible. That's just my approach. It doesn't have to be yours. You can start with the Bible. It's not a bad thing to do. It's a reliable textual text. It's a reliable text. But generally, I want to find out if the person believes in God or not and what their reasons are for that. So the approach that I take is I'll find out like I've been talking about, where are they at? What do they believe? I generally find out, especially if they're an atheist that doesn't take the Bible as a reliable source, I generally find out that they actually do believe in something called good and evil. So I'm going to press them on that point. Where do you get the idea that there is something that is good and there is something that is evil? Where's that coming from? It doesn't come out of thin air. You can't just make it up. It can't be whatever I say goes, right? Because then we're back to, well, was Hitler wrong? Because, if it's just what I say is good, or if it's just what I say is evil, then everybody's right, and nobody's right. We've got absurdity. So where do you get good and evil? That's usually where I start, with somebody who doesn't want to use the Bible. And eventually, if I lead them towards God as the standard of good, how do we know that? Well, he's revealed himself to us, but where did he reveal himself as the standard of goodness? In the Bible. That's where we get that idea that there is a standard of goodness called God, who is revealed in Jesus Christ. But that's where we get the idea. So what I usually do first is just talk about, how do you know that there's something called good? Like, how did you decide to get up this morning? What made you think that was a good idea? What is good anyway? Right? And how do you look for that? So my initial reaction to this is to point them towards the moral law argument, that wherever there's morality, where there's a moral law, you have to have somebody giving the law, a moral lawgiver. And that's where I would go with that. I hope that I've answered this question for the person who was asking it, but that's my general answer. Yeah.
Hi. I just recently, this year, started teaching high school, and I have lots of interesting kids. And in the school, actually, my classes, I have about 10 atheist kids. And when I try and talk to them, or I engage in conversation with them, I ask them if they believe in God, and of course they're like, no. And my kids that say yes, I'm like, okay, so we have the Bible. How many of you believe, if you believe in God, we have the Bible, how many of you believe that it's God's word, that it is real? And of course my atheists do not believe that. My question is, and also to my other family members and friends that are agnostic, they say that the Bible is just a bunch of stories made up to teach us right from wrong. What do I say to that? Because honestly, I'm in over my head.
Okay.
You know, and I've done your study, and you've helped me so much by watching the videos here at the church that I've caught myself saying, really, why do you believe that? You know, and it's really helped me a lot, and I thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I was looking at Marie, if you saw that, because Marie and I have been commenting that we go off and back to our place where we're staying, we talk about certain arguments just off the top of our head. And the really interesting thing is you've been asking us questions based on all of those conversations that she and I have been having that you didn't know we were having. This is one of them. So it's really unique, it's really odd to us, or maybe it's just really God working in all of our lives, right? But we were just commenting on that. So this is a great question. How do we know the Bible's not just a bunch of made-up stories? So many ways we could go with this. Where are you? Right there. Okay. I'll tell you what I was telling her. There's a professor at Oxford University whose name is John Lennox. I've recently become a huge fan of his because his parents thought it was a good idea to have him study the Bible all his life. And so he's been studying it since he was very small. He has a site called keybibleconcepts.org. And I'm currently working through all his material. And I read something on, I told you guys I do Jesus Christ is not just another myth. That's one of my areas. And I encountered one of his arguments for that I'd never heard before, so I'll share it with you. So one thing we know if you study literature is that enduring fictional characters, so characters that are created that last throughout time, that make it, throughout history and people still know who they are extremely rare. And they take a genius of a writer to come up with them. Okay, so this is in history, you don't have that many characters that, think of all the books that have ever been written. You don't know most of those characters. The ones that have endured were written by literary geniuses. So what do we have with Jesus? We have one of the most enduring characters that has ever been written about. He survived for 2,000 years, and people are willing to go to their deaths for this quote-unquote fictional character because they believe he's a living and real person. So you have not only, because the Bible's not just somebody sat down and wrote it, right? That's not what you've got going on. You have a collection of letters. So you have basically, you're admitting, when somebody says that the Bible is just maybe a bunch of myths or stories written down, that's not considering the whole situation. The situation is that you have a phenomenal fictional character, quote-unquote fictional, that was dreamed up by 4 literary geniuses all at the same time. If the story of Christ is fictional, then you have a miracle that it was. You actually have a miracle that 4 people at the same time thought of the same fictional character in exactly the same story in exactly the same time in history. And their character they created was so good. He was such an amazing character that he's transformed the lives of billions of people. That is miraculous, folks. Have you ever thought about that? Boy, leave it to Lennox. What a great, I've never even thought about that because I am not a literature major, so I don't study what does it take to make such a great literary character. So he's saying this is actually, you would be admitting to a miracle to call these myths or creations or just made up stories. That's amazing to me. I'd never even thought about that. So that's one of the things I push people to. Jesus' story, if he's fictional, he's the greatest character of history ever. He's the greatest fictional character. So you need to explain to me how 4 geniuses who were fishermen and, well, there's a physician in there, but how they were all able to come up with the greatest fictional character of all time at the same time. I need that explained because that's unheard of. You don't have anything else going on like that, ever, anywhere in the world, except this one time. So it's just one argument about the Bible is a bunch of stories. Not so much. Push people into actually considering what they are. There's more you can learn about this. I want to recommend another book. I'm like a library. I'm a walking library. Here's another book for you. The book is called Cold Case Christianity. It's by Jim Warner Wallace. Cold Case Christianity by Jim Warner Wallace. The reason I recommend this book to you is Jim Wallace is a LA homicide detective, Los Angeles. He's a Los Angeles homicide detective for cold cases. So, the entirety of his job is to prosecute criminals on circumstantial evidence. Okay, circumstantial evidence, things that happened in history. So as he began to look at the circumstantial evidence that we have available for Jesus' death and resurrection, because that's what we have. We weren't there. All we have is a cold case, right? We have more than that, but that's what we got, the court of law. So we have a cold case. So he started looking at the Gospels from the perspective of a detective, and he started breaking down the Gospel writers. How can I trust the Gospel writers? So he looked for motive. Can I discredit their motive? Are they writing these things down out of lust or greed or any of the things that we dismiss a person's testimony for? He couldn't find any. Couldn't find any reason to dismiss the motives of the Gospel writers. So he's like, now I have to accept their testimony because for them, they were either reporting somebody's eyewitness testimony or they had eyewitness testimony. So I have to figure out why I don't trust them, even though I would admit them in a court of law. Like I would have to admit their testimony in a court of law. And so he went through the Gospels and he's going through them to show you that according to the circumstantial evidence, he'd actually come out with the verdict that Jesus rose from the dead. So I think it's a very valuable story for people, or a book, for people who reject the testimony of the Gospels without giving you reason. Because according to this gentleman, and he takes you right through all the law terms, this is good evidence, and it would be admissible in a court of law on circumstantial evidence to prosecute Jesus as rising from the dead. It's a weird way to put it, right? But that's what he said. So there's so many directions you can go. Another direction you can go is that Jesus is he doesn't look like the mythological gods in any sense. So when people say, oh, there were a lot of stories of gods in the ancient Near East, or, there's been so many gods written about. Jesus is just another god. That's so uninformed. It displays ignorance of anything about these gods. So what I ask people, I said, well, tell me about Osiris. Where are you getting the story from? Tell me about Horus. Have you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where the stories come from? The coffin text, the pyramid text. Have you read these? Because when I read them, I did not find the story of Jesus in there. It looks nothing like the story of Jesus. Now, why do I bring this up? Because I mentioned Bill Maher, and he said faith was a lack of critical thinking when he was on that television show that broadcast to millions of viewers. You know what else he said? The story of Jesus is exactly the story of Horus. That's where people are getting that from. They don't know it, but that's where they're hearing these things, and they're not critically analyzing, they're not thinking, they're allowing it to form their belief. So then you have, okay, so what does the story of Horus look like? Well, Horus was the child of incestual relationship between two gods, a brother and sister. And Horus, his birth, there's so many different stories, depending on what Egyptian dynasty you're in. Like he rips out of his mother's womb in one story. In another story, he was conceived, I'm sorry, this is going to be a little sexually graphic, but Horus's conception, Jesus is virgin, he's a virgin born, but Horus's conception, which is supposed to be just like Jesus, is that Isis, two stories, either Isis, his mother, had sex with Osiris, his father, in their mother's womb, while they're still fetuses, or Isis had intercourse with the dead Osiris. Dead Osiris. This is just like the story of Jesus, right? See how unconscionable that is? This is ridiculous. And we have to, but people don't know that because they're listening to Bill Maher say, well, it's exactly the same as Jesus. Really? Where? Where is that from? So there's so many avenues you could go with this. I really like Lennox's. I think it's very interesting that people never even think of that, because they don't think about what does it take to write a great work of fiction, right? Something that will endure through time. They don't think that way. Just go, oh, it's made up, whatever. No, it's not that simple. So that's the answer. That's the, 15-minute answer to the one question. All right. We've got 4 more questions. We're done. No. Go ahead.
No, I just run into a situation in the youth ministry and stuff. We focus a lot on establishing that it's reasonable, that there is like one reality, that there's not, there's an absolute truth, right? So, and we work on that. But I have a good friend who is a philosophy master's degree. And we started talking about it, and I was just interested, my background's in theology, hers in philosophy, so I was like, what do they teach you guys for your master's degree about absolute truth? And we got into it, but in these types of conversation, the argument, I'll just keep it specific. This friend will concede that, yes, there is a truth, because if you say, your truth is good, your truth is true for you, and my truth is true for me, well, you're making a truth claim that is true for everyone by saying, so, my question is, she concedes, okay, there is an absolute reality, there is an absolute truth, but we can't know it. And so the argument fizzles, so how do we avoid the pitfall of going there? How do we re-jump start it and not just okay, I guess if that's what you want to take it as. She concedes the point, but says oh, we can't know it. So.
Yeah. And you see the same problem, right?
Yeah.
So she said, she's not willing to say what's true for you is true for you, what's true for me is true for me, because she realizes that she's just said something she thinks is true for everybody.
Yeah.
So that blows her argument. That's called a self-refuting statement. But we can't know anything is also a self-refuting statement, because she couldn't know that.
Right.
So what we have to do is you have to try to help her see that she's caught in a realm of self-refuting statements. And the interesting thing is that she's studying philosophy as if she's going to know something when she's done. But she's saying we can't know the truth. Girl, you're in the wrong degree program. You see what I'm saying? Why are you spending your whole life studying epistemology, how we know things? Why are you studying how we know things? Why are you studying what we know? When you think there's nothing, at the end of your degree, what are you going to do? Throw up your hands and say, whatever?
Right. I mean, that's
because
how
that's
the
what she's
argument
saying.
goes, yeah.
So, does she acknowledge that? That at the end of her degree, her point of view would be just I've learned nothing because I can't know anything.
I don't know if it's I guess the question was more is that it's obviously just a dismissive behavior, okay, well, I don't have an answer, so we'll just dismiss it. It may be that, or she's actually coming to the conclusion okay, I can see that there's something, either A, I don't care what that something is, and because I think her specific philosophy degree was in ethics or something. So,
Okay. Yeah.
So, it
where
goes
do we
towards
move it, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Where do we move on? What's the next step in the process of that discussion?
Right. So it may seem hopeless if you were.
Yeah.
But here's what I do, and you try it. She may respond. She may figure out what you're doing. We'll see. So when we talk about the word truth, sometimes our mind just kind of swirls around. What is truth? What are you even talking about? These are big concepts that don't have they don't feel very concrete. And so we don't have no example when we say things we can't really know anything at all. And then you say, well, how do you even know that? Okay, some people go aha, got it. But other people just that's a bunch of swirly, gooey stuff up there. So with people who are saying things like that, I press them on something that they think they know. So what are her other commitments? Like, does she believe torturing babies for fun is wrong?
Right.
How does she know that? If she doesn't know it, why does she not torture babies for fun? Maybe she doesn't find it fun, but what does she find fun? Why does she obey the laws? Because you can't actually know if you'll get, if they're a law. Why is she obeying laws? Why does she stop at stop signs? You can't really know if the stop sign's there, so
Right.
why are you obeying that? She is caught in a trap of, she's using this in the world of concepts, but pragmatically, every day she is not living according to this. So find something she cares about. Is it abortion? Is it homosexuality? Is it the environment? What does she care about? And say, well, we can never know anything about that, so I can just dump as much nuclear waste into the bay as I want. Because we can't know if it's going to kill anything. We can't know truth.
Right.
What would she say? She would be caught, right? You absolutely, like I always use the example from NASA, we really can't know if that space shuttle that we're putting together, we don't use the shuttles anymore, by the way, but we really can't know if that space shuttle is going to get our astronauts up there and back again without killing them. So let's just put it together with marshmallows and gumdrops. And it just fails. Because we actually do know, there's actually something that relates to an objective reality.
Right.
We can deny it, that doesn't make it go away. So if I jump off a building, I'm absolutely going to hit the ground. And even though I can't know if gravity's real, it's there.
Yeah.
So yeah, push her on something that is important to her, and I don't know what that is. So you figure out what's important to her. I did that with the Buddhist on the plane when he told me there's no right or wrong. I said, okay, this is really graphic. I'm sorry, I pushed people. He was getting a little testy with me. He was trying to say, oh no, there's no right or wrong, and you're just all arrogant for saying you know truth. And I said, okay, so if there's no right or wrong, if I were to rape and murder your wife, you'd be okay with that. Because maybe I enjoy that, and it's good for me. And he saw what I was doing, and he went, I said, would you prosecute me? Would you put me in jail? And he goes, yes. I said, why? Why would you do that? He said, well, it's the law of the land. I said, I don't care. Why would you do that? If you don't think there's any right or wrong, the law does not apply. Law is based on the idea that there's something right, there's something wrong. So I pushed him on it, and he saw the problem. Yeah.
I think.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. Do you think the movie God Is Not Dead has been instrumental in raising awareness or creating interest or stirring up a hunger, especially in the youth, about learning of apologetics so that they can be prepared to defend their faith?
Thank you for asking me that. I know the author of the book, God's Not Dead, and he had me preview the movie. And so we've talked a lot about he asked me to review it, and we talked a lot about how it communicated the message. And yes, I do think it raised awareness. Now, I hope you've been able to tell from me, I like to be personable and gracious with people and winsome. And I said the only thing that I felt was that it was a little aggressive with the atheists. I said, I don't actually encounter atheist philosophy teachers that are that mean. Then Rice Brooks is his name, started to tell me about his experiences with different atheist philosophy professors. And he said, the guy in the movie is tame. He toned him down. He asked them to tone him down from what he experienced in real life. This guy's tame. Okay, so if you've seen the movie, he's pretty aggressive, you know? And then at the end of the movie, I said, Rice, this was brilliant. Whoever did this, praise the Lord. Very end of the movie, there's a list of all the lawsuits that either are against Christians or Christians are bringing up against universities for persecution against their faith. And there's this long list that goes by at the end of the movie of all these stateside, I don't even know, it may go out into other parts of the world, but all these universities that currently have lawsuits over this issue. And I said that was brilliant because that shows you it's not just somebody's, they're just making this up or this is a story or it's their own experience. It's happening all over. I said, brilliant, brilliant for that. I do think it is raising awareness. Again, my style is a little more conversational, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people like that out there that are being aggressive towards Christians. And they do need handled, so they need to be engaged. Handled may not be the good word, but they need to be engaged.
Hi. I have a question. Hopefully you can help answer it. I've been in discussion with a good friend of mine in California, and people in Texas. My family's in Texas, and the question gets into the political realm with the degradation of the morals of our country and the policies that are coming down coming from our government. How would you help me and others to explain these degradations and what is our response to that, and how do we answer our friends and our family members without coming across too hard or too harsh, or is there a way?
Great, indeed there is. Okay, so lots of things on this one too. So, first of all, we're becoming more and more of a historylessness of people. Well, a historyless people. A historyless people. We don't care about our past. We don't know it. I can tell you right now that there are Muslims that remember the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, and they still hold France and Britain responsible, even though it's been so long ago. And they're ready for any moment to act upon that history. Okay? We forget history because we live in a peaceful society. It's like the Pax Romana. So we just tend to not think, why did the Roman Empire fall? What were the factors that led up to that? Let's not do that again. Right? Let's not do that again. What was problematic in Nazi Germany? What were some of the things they did, and what were the symptoms leading up to when the Nazis came to power? Let's not do that again. What was it about Russia, communist Russia, that was problematic? What did they do? Like in France, what did they do to their clergy? When they went after all their clergy and just killed all of them, get rid of all religion. Religion is violent. It's vile to us. We don't want it for our children. Let's get rid of everybody. Let's just put to death everybody. Not just the clergy, it was all the royalty too. Let's not do that again. Right? And yet, here we are, and we see symptoms. We see symptoms in our culture of the same problems because people do not know their history. I can tell you honestly, I don't know all the details. I study generalities. I read Rodney Stark. He traces back through Western culture. I think his book is called The Rise of Christianity. But he traces all of this. What has happened in all these societies? How is Christianity transforming in the political realm? What did it do? It freed slaves. It gave women rights. It gave us freedom. We realized that men were created equal. It took us a long time sometimes to figure these things out, but that's what it's been doing in the political realm. Why would we go back to ideas that formed these other societies that were so damaging and ended up having, like 60 million people from communist Russia who were put to death. I might be getting the wrong person there. It's Stalin's regime. The starving of the Ukraine, That's one of the problems. We have to point out to people, well, what is it that was done in the past, and do we see any of this happening again? We don't want that to happen again. So we have to become informed on what happened in the past, what led up to it, then we have to be able to share that with people. So that's our political realm. Like, if you want to be informed on politics, look to history. Don't do what was done in the past, right? That's why the Houston, the thing that happened in my city, Houston, with the mayor subpoenaing sermons from 5 area pastors was so bad, because we've already seen that in history. That's Nazi Germany, where all the churches were under control of the socialist regime. Right? This Bonhoeffer story, I shared a quote with you from Bonhoeffer. The church had to go underground. The real church, the Christians had all go underground because they did not want to submit to Nazi government of their churches and the Nazi propaganda in their churches. So this is the kind of, yeah, oh wait, what she did smells of Nazi Germany. And I've actually said this to people, family, friends. I've said, hey, when you vote for somebody, you need to know their philosophy. Don't just vote for a party. That gets us into trouble. Know their philosophy. So I had to explain to one of my friends that one person that was up for election he had a pragmatic theory of truth, which means whatever works is what's true. Okay, you don't want a person in office that believes whatever works is what's currently true, because they can change the truth at any given moment. Right? You need a person in office that believes there's a standard of truth, and they're accountable to that. Right? So I had that conversation, and I said, if you vote for a person who's pragmatic in their theory, guess what he's going to do, or she's going to do. They're going to do whatever it takes for the good of the most people, right? They're going to become utilitarian on us. And what I brought up the elderly, not 45-year-olds. I said, the elderly, if you vote a pragmatist into office, which, by the way, Hitler was a pragmatist. If you vote a pragmatist into office, they just do whatever works. So if the handicapped, the sick, and the elderly don't work for our society, they're the first thing to go. You guys go. We don't need you. And if you want a reference that you can actually watch, Logan's Run. It's a science fiction movie from the 70s, I believe. And it's all about this. What happens to a society where they vote in pragmatism and utilitarianism? Well, they have this society, all they care about is pleasure. They're hedonistic. So at the age of 33, you start to decay faster, right? At the age of 33, your body can no longer repair itself as fast. You actually begin the process of dying. Yay, that's a great thought. But in the movie, at the age of 33, they were all their names were the whole society's names were put into a lottery, and they chose people out of the lottery, and they called it something wonderful, and you would go to the lottery. They killed you. They killed you off, so they didn't have to support you because you're a drain on society. This is in our history. Why do we repeat history over and over? It's because we don't know it, and we don't care to know it. We're apathetic. We're really looking for our own individual pleasure and comfort. And because we focus so much on individualism, which is not just our own fault, it's the story we've been getting from commercials. Dr. Pepper, be an individual, right? Be a pepper. Be yourself. Do what you want. It's all about you. No, you live in community. Be a member of the community. Take care of the community. Be part of the human race. So our thinking is just out the window. If you're not part of the community, you don't need to remember the past. You don't need to know where you've come from. You don't need to know where you're going. It's all about you. Leads to all sorts of evil in government. So my response is I help people to think through it. I had a person tell me, I wish the abortion debate would go away. I'm tired of it. And I said, because the abortion debate centers on what is a human being, and I'm one of them, I hope that talk never goes away. Like, how do we know what's human? I hope we're always discussing that, because that's essential to life. So those are the kind of responses I give. Told you there's a lot in there. I'm like an encyclopedia sometimes. And the degradations is a historylessness. You said, how do we explain that all these, because we don't care to not repeat history. And because of open rebellion to God.
Hello, I'm Alex. I left you a piece of paper up there with like 5 questions. So if you'd like to answer a lot of questions, I think they're from your actual study. We got it with the, when we did the book.
So why do you believe us?
Yes. And I just circled like 5 questions. They don't have to be really, really long. I would just like to hear how you answer those questions. If somebody's asked you that, and how you answer them.
Okay.
And like, It could be just real quick, because I'm just 5 questions.
Okay.
All right? You should have them there. It says to Mary Jo from Alex.
I saw it.
Oh, okay. Do you see he's encouraging me not to go long on my answer?
No. I don't want to take up somebody else's time. Sorry.
So, who is God? How do you know He really exists? I was giving earlier a whole bunch of arguments on that. That's actually where I start with people. Do I believe there is a God? And the one that really gets me is the moral law. How do I know there's good? Really, if there's no moral lawgiver, there's no standard of good, then I do not have good and evil. And that leads to all sorts of problems for me as a human being in my experience in this life. Because my experience is there are things that are good and there are things that are bad. Some things help me flourish as a human. Some things make me not flourish as a human. And so to deny that those exist would be to deny reality. So that's, who is God? One of the ways I go is the moral law. To me, I know there's good and evil, there's right and wrong. This one's funny. It says, why does science disprove the Bible? It does not. So does science disprove the Bible? I'm changing your questions, okay? All right. Again, I said this earlier. I want to make sure you understand. Science is the term science, which has gotten quite this high honor lately, and it's a good thing, but it has come out of the Christian understanding. Did you just hear that? Science came out of the Christian understanding that there is an external reality of which we can explore and that we can know truth about. This came out of the belief from gentlemen like Francis Bacon that God created everything and therefore everything was worth investigating. There was nothing that we should leave uninvestigated because as we learn about the natural world, we learn about the Creator. Francis Bacon made that argument. So you don't find that argument in belief systems that don't even believe that this is real. All of this is an illusion, like in Buddhism. What you're experiencing now is an illusion. What about in Hinduism, where when the god that's sleeping wakes up, that's what's real. This is all the dream, Vishnu's dream. So those kind of beliefs don't lend people to go out and investigate everything because this is all unreal. Science is firmly planted in the Christian ideology that God created everything, therefore everything is worth knowing. Isn't that interesting now how science is that people say, oh, science has disproved God. No, it hasn't. One reason people are saying science has disproved God, there's many. Let me give you this. I'm reading a book right now called Aping Mankind. The subtitle's like Darwinitis, Neuromania, and the Misrepresentation of Mankind. It's a hard read. Let me tell you that. It's a hard read. It's in the field of neuroscience. There is an atheist who is very upset with what's called a functional MRI, an fMRI, and you're probably familiar with functional MRIs, even if you don't know you are, because every once in a while we find out where the God part of the brain is, or where the love part of the brain is, and what Raymond Tallis, who's a neuroscientist, is saying is this is not good science. It's bunk. And he's been saying this for years because all that happens is you set people in front of pictures and you do the MRI on their brain, you scan their brain, and it's showing you what's firing up. And he says all that's showing you is where the blood's going in the brain. Yeah, so you can't actually know what part of the brain is thinking about that. But that's what's being said. And people will say things, they'll translate that to, look, we know where the God part of the brain is. So actually, this part of your brain makes you believe in God. He's not real. That is bunk. Even an atheist neuroscientist says this is not true, and it needs to be shut down because it's not credible science. But it's greatly influenced us. So people say things like science has disproved God. They don't even know what they're saying. How? How has science disproved God? Where are you getting that from? Let's look at the studies. So aping mankind, if you want to trudge through that with me, it's because he has to give you all the neuroscience behind it. He has to take you through all the language, so it ends up being really weighty. Oh, if God created everything, why did he create the devil? So remember, the devil is Lucifer, the most beautiful, bright morning star angel who was worshiping God at all times. Lucifer is not he's not who he is now. He was not who he is now. Why did God create you? You're evil too, right? Not at the level of Lucifer. Don't take that. The father of lies. I'm not comparing you to the father of lies. What God created was originally good, but he did give free will. That's very important. Okay, it's very important. He gave you free will. And he gave, apparently Lucifer had free will. And that free will has a consequence. You can use it. There's consequences for good, there's consequences for bad. Okay? If he didn't give you a free will, you wouldn't be a person who is free to make choices. You wouldn't have autonomy. The way people like to say it is we'd be like robots, right? So we wouldn't really be making real decisions. We wouldn't really have any choice. But the funny thing is he created us in a way in which we think we have choice. So we're all deluded. If free will's not there, we're all delusional. You're just doing what God created you to do. Okay? So the existence of the devil goes back to free will and Lucifer's choice that he made to be disobedient towards God, which we also do. Okay? The consequence of our choice, actually, if you choose good, the consequence is human flourishing in life, which is the way it was supposed to be. If you choose evil, if you choose to do that which is away from the character of God, which is what Lucifer chose, that's evil, and the consequence is death. Okay? Now, I don't know all of the details about the devil to be able to give them to you right on the spot. But having been in the, let me just say that I don't know all the details, but I know that he had free will, and the consequence of his evil is death. And what you're experiencing with the father of lies is that he's very upset about that. Okay? He's going to drag as many of you with him as he can, because he does not want that consequence. So I'll leave it there for that one. Just to go off into other areas, I don't have as much on the top of my head for that. Okay. Do people who have never heard about Jesus go to hell? You know how you said, like, I want your quick answer. Yeah. This whole book's written on this one. Do people who have never heard about Jesus go to hell? And then there's another question too, but let me do that one. Wow. There's so many assumptions in this one. Number one, it doesn't assume that God's sovereign, or that he's provident. And so, if you believe in the sovereignty of God, if you believe that God, and even if you believe in the omniscience of God, that he knows everything, then you understand that God knows everything. So he knows that who's going to hear about, he knows how they're going to hear about, he knows everything. He actually knows what choice you're going to make. Right? He actually knows everything. So the people who have never heard about Jesus thing, I think God gives them, I don't know, well, okay, let me say this. Number one, who are they? When people ask you, the people who didn't hear about Jesus, did they go to hell? That is what if somebody never hears about Jesus? Who's the person that didn't hear about Jesus?
Like deep inner Brazil.
Well, it's nice to pontificate, but are there people in deep Brazil? Who are they? Because there are missionaries that have died in deep South America for spreading the gospel because they spread it to cannibals. I forgot the name of the missionaries, but it's a famous story. The Elliot family. There are people in the deepest part, like nomadic herders. There are missionaries currently preaching the gospel to nomadic herders in not Afghanistan, but over in that area.
In Russia.
Yeah. So I have to ask people to tell me who are the people who never heard about Jesus, because I believe in the sovereignty and providence of God that for somebody to hear about Jesus, He can make a way for them. He can have that person there who tells them. He can show them through general revelation who He is. He can give Muslims visions and dreams like Nabil Qureshi's vision of Jesus, which brought him around as well. He can do that. So I need to know who those people are that haven't heard about it. Now, they're there, by the way, but we're spreading the gospel to all the world. So it's a what-if question, and if you find those people and you are concerned about this question, then go tell them about Jesus. Right?
Yep.
People like to say this. God's sovereign. He's still in control. This relates to me. I don't know if you'll pick up on this, but this relates to me with, I'm concerned about like people who are close to me that are not believers in God. And here's what I have to do. I have to say, I do my part to do what God commanded me to do. Then I trust God with that person. And these people who haven't heard about Jesus' question, I have to say, I trust God with those people, and I do my part.
I've had that question in my mind since I was like 5 or 6 years old. When the service has been up, I thought all this stuff. What about those people that live that nobody's ever going to be able to get to them? And
Wait, let me give you people who have answered that question better than me. Okay? Paul Copan. Paul Copan is a Christian philosopher. He teaches at West Palm Beach University. He's answered that question, and way better than I just did. So Paul Copan, I'm thinking there's another.
Don Richardson, Eternity in Their Hearts.
Who's the? Don Richardson?
Eternity in Their
Okay,
Hearts.
Eternity in Their Hearts. So like I said, when I don't have all the answers, I'll just tell you. Those guys have done a better job than I have on that one. But that's one of my things, is I want to know who they are. Okay, what do we got time-wise?
We can, if you're gonna answer that last question, do you have a question, Liliana? So Liliana and Mercedes, and then we're done. So
Okay.
there's 3 questions. The last on the paper and the 2 ladies.
Oh, is the last on the paper the one that was written out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If it makes any sense.
Yeah, the people who say the Bible's a book is the Word of God. How do you prove that? All right, so number one, when people say, well, the Bible's a book, they usually are saying this behind it. Say, what do you mean by that? That's what I would say. What do you mean by that? Bible's a book. What are you saying? Because there could be an assumption back there, well, it's a book, that means it was written by man, so therefore it cannot be the Word of God. Or it can't be true. People say man's fallible, so it can't be true if man wrote it down. Then I say, wait a second. Have you ever put together like a ceiling fan? Did the directions work? Well, man wrote something true, didn't he? Because you put it together and your ceiling fan's going. So obviously what he wrote was the absolute truth. Man can convey truth. So I have to get people beyond that, because that would blow up everything we ever knew at all. Because anything that had been written down is out now. That's all of science, history, it's all gone. I don't think they don't follow the implication of what they're saying. They just like to throw it out there like a soundbite. So make sure you say, well, what do you mean by that? How do you prove that it's the Word of God? Again, I go back to, this is my answer, there's better answers than mine. But you go back to, what does the Bible teach? And I mentioned earlier to the gentleman in the back who asked the question about how do we know it's true. Somebody says this is true, somebody says that's true. And I said, James Sire wrote a book called The Universe Next Door, where he takes every worldview from their text, like the Bible Bible's our text, and they ask basic questions that it should answer about the reality of the universe. There's basic questions like, what is the problem of mankind and what's the solution to that? And there's more questions, there's like 5 or 6. And it tests every view. And it says the one that ends up matching the reality of the universe is the one that's accurately reporting. And that happens to be the Bible. So the Bible's the one that's accurately reporting what, like the psychology of mankind, why we fail when we sin, or what sin is, that it's even real, that we fail when we keep trying not to fail. So what I would say is one of the things we know about the Bible being the Word of God is it's reporting accurately the experiences that we have as human beings in this world, whereas the others fail. Okay, there are other arguments. There's mine, because I don't want to keep going and and on and on. Did I help at all with any of those? Okay. Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
We tend to try to remember happy thoughts and remember when God answers our prayers. But very often I'm asked, how can I see something that God did not give me, and how can I be grateful for that? And that how can asking that question strengthen my faith?
All right.
Right?
So one of the, for me, I'll answer out of my experience. For me, when I ask for something and God does not seem to answer it, or He doesn't give it to me, either way, that's folks. That's where what I said earlier. I do apologetics and make arguments for God's existence, but sometimes life does not make sense to me. Like say a tragedy happens, or somebody hurts me, somebody I trusted, or something like that. And that doesn't seem to be within the plan. You know, that doesn't seem to be the way things should go. And you know, you pray to God, and it seems like it doesn't get answered. That's where I have to fall back on what I know about God and His character in order to trust that it's going to be okay in the end. Because I know it's going to be. That's where I have faith in God for the things I cannot answer, I cannot see. Like why He's not answering me in this moment. I can't answer that. I can't know why. I may know why 20 years down the road. And I've actually seen that happen where I thought, here's an example. Since I was a sophomore in high school, dead set in my mind I was going to teach high school band, I was going to go to college, teach college, or go to college, get a master's, teach college band. I was going to take over the Boston Pop Symphony Orchestra where John Williams was. And John Williams is the composer that wrote the music for Indiana Jones and Temple Doom and Jaws and Star Wars and Independence Day, all this good stuff. That did not happen.
The other part of the question is, do you think that...
Wait, sorry, hold on, just right there. I was almost done.
Oh,
You're right. Okay, so no, it's all right. That did not happen because he had a different path I was supposed to take, which is this one. I did not know that 20 years ago, right? So if I had prayed, there was a prayer that I'm almost done. Keep that in mind. There was a prayer that I prayed when I was in a certain church. After I'd gone through the time of doubting, I would go up every Sunday morning and say, God, just use me. Whatever you're doing, use me. Please use me. Didn't happen for years. All of a sudden, all of this happened. And it's really sudden. I mean, I started doubting my faith in probably around 2003, 2004. Now I have a full-time speaking ministry, and I'm a professor teaching logic. We don't always know. And the way here was not always easy. It was actually very hard. And there were a lot of times where I didn't know what was going on. Okay, so I didn't know. All right.
so would you recommend then churches to have a small part where people can just minister and voice how God has used their lives to do miracles so that others can see that miracles still take place, and that when our petitions are not answered, can that work for the apologetic movement?
Yeah, actually it can. Again, that's why there's a basis of knowing God's character and knowing what you believe and testing it against worldviews, because you are going to go through times that are hard in which you don't understand. I had a lady, after I gave a talk on the problem of evil, she came up to me and said, why did God take my child of 3 years old with leukemia? He's gone now. And she said, I don't understand. And I said, I don't understand either. So what do you need? Do you need a hug? Or do you need me to give you philosophical answers? And she said, I think I need both. Okay? So I don't know. But here's what I would say about the church providing opportunity. Yes, I think we should be giving testimony. Would I run it through your pastor first? Yes. Allow your pastor to counsel with you, discern with you, whether or not this is something that should be shared for everybody. But J.P. Moreland, in his book, In Search of a Confident Faith, he says one of the reasons that people are losing faith in guys, they say there are no miracles. They say these things they are happening. They are happening. God is still performing miracles. It's just not the grandiose miracle of like the coming down in the pillar of fire, because these are for... We read the Bible and we compact all the miracles that happen. They happened over thousands of years, right? You think they're all like, maybe somebody's reading the Bible and think, well, that was in like 20 years, right? Or less. No, thousands. So he's still doing his work. So we need to be sharing the stories. That's what the original disciples did. Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. You know, they would share this with each other. They would share their miraculous stories. That's why we have the New Testament. They're sharing the miraculous stories to give you evidence of who Jesus is and why you can trust him. So we need to do that as well. We need to share that with one another. And it would be great if a church had a testimony time. Again, go through your pastor. And share what Jesus Christ has been doing and the miraculous things that he's been doing in people's lives. So yeah, I think we should. It would encourage people in the faith.
And here's the last question of our session.
It's not really a question. It's a couple of things. Today at lunch, Nadir said that we needed you 40 years ago, but you weren't born yet, so. But
I am 40. So. They also told me that when I gave my example, I killed off everybody in the room except for like myself and a few other ladies.
But I agree with him. We could have all used this 40 years ago. I mean, you're never too young. And as your good friend Marie, and now our good friend Marie, said, you know, she plays the atheist game with her kids because you're never too young to know. And you're never too young to learn and defend the faith. And so I wanted to thank you for cautioning us, charging us with the responsibility for what we have learned today. And I also wanted to thank you for cautioning us towards culture and how culture can infiltrate us. And while I was thinking about that, and you were mentioning mythology and Horus and how we tend to buy into that culture, because right now, you know, mythology is really in with all the new books and the new rages and stuff like that with our young people today. But they don't know the real stories. Yeah. And so if you were to question them, what is your source on mythology, they probably would quote you the modernized versions. And I guess I'm bringing that to remind you, because you asked me to remind you what I'm going to say next. But before I say that, mythology, almost 20 years ago, when I was learning and taking my responsibility as a mother seriously on what was going to be fed into my daughter, and, you know, whether it be Disney, whether it be, you know, Bible, true Bible things. I mean, I would discard a Bible video if Daniel wasn't 80 years old. Okay? Because if he was little boy Daniel in the lion's den, I was like, no, that's not the way it went down. You know, or David, you know, an old man instead of a young man, etc. But in mythology, in Disney's version of Hercules, I'll be the first to admit, it caused me, Disney's version of Hercules, you look at it and you watch it, and they try to stream in that he's almost a Jesus figure, even to the point of leaving his deity to go down into Hades to rescue and save his true love. And so our kids get bombarded with that. Even in our own culture, in our Christian culture, we get bombarded with that, where they belittle, you know, El Niñito Jesus, you know, baby Jesus, and you know that, or they switch the stories around to make them palatable for children, but we forget to teach them the real stuff. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that thank you for admonishing us that we need to teach our young people. And that's not really the question. The question is really the reminder for you to tell us about the children's books that can help us be true to not just what we learn today, but be responsible in teaching our children also
Yeah.
on how to defend this, because our youth is being bombarded by some really rotten culture.
Yeah. So the younger you can start, the better. Thank you for the reminder. I'm going to tell you 2 authors and their children's series that teach apologetics to like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. And then I'm going to pray for you guys, and then I'll let the pastor come up to dismiss you all. So I already mentioned one is William Lane Craig. 10 books. William Lane Craig wrote 10 books on the attributes of God. They're called What is God Like? The What is God Like series. So each book is God is Spirit. And it's for little bitty kids. They learn this from Papa Bear and Red Goose or something like that. They're cute. He wrote them I think he said he wrote them for his own kids. So William Lane Craig, the What is God Like series, you can order it on Amazon. The other is a colleague of, well, they're both colleagues of mine at Houston Baptist University. I forgot, we just got William Lane Craig. Her name is Melissa Cain like Cain and Abel. Melissa Cain Travis. And though the title of her 2 books are escaping me, they're children's books, and they teach science and faith to little bitty kids. Like, where did the universe come from? What explains a universe coming into existence? Why this is so important is from very, very young, your kids are getting education from an atheist psychology in the public schools, in state schools. So it's important that you have something else that teaches them that universes don't create or pop into existence, or they are created. They come into existence from the Lord. So the universe came into existence. So these books will help. So Melissa Cain Travis has 2 of them out, and I think she has a 3rd one coming out, and they're for her own children. She wrote them for her little boys. All right. So those were the 2 children's books. Thanks for reminding me. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you all. I am now in love with Puerto Rico.
Very good. We're gonna post, because it was on the same line of the offers that you were mentioning. There was a question that was tweeted with time.
Okay.
We just want to post it so that you can mention a few resources
okay.
for the person, and then we'll pray.
Yeah. Okay. So depending on where you're at, the Fallacy Detective, that book I mentioned, that's the best beginner book that I've found. I use with my freshmen in college a book called Socratic Logic by Peter. His name's Kreft, but it's spelled Kreeft. Kreeft. Peter Kreft. Kreeft. Socratic Logic. That's a great place to go. Trying to think of other books that aren't quite so technical. Boy, that's what I got off the top of my head. My Socratic Logic book. Many of the apologists are starting to teach basic logic, so when you look up apologetics, but if you Google apologetics and critical thinking, apologetics and logic, you'll see some in there. There'll be some recommendations. I'm sorry I don't have more off the top of my head.
It's okay. They can always go to your website and your blog and ask you. And
oh,
if you
yeah.
have time, just let
But
me know.
I use the Socratic Logic book to teach what a good argument is and what all the material, there's a lot of material fallacies, the errors in reasoning in there. So those are good works. All right. So now I want to pray for my new Puerto Rican friends. Thank you so much. For me, it felt like a very short time together. Maybe for you, it felt long. But I really am encouraged that you are here, that you care about this material. And so I want to offer a prayer for us, and then the pastor will come. Lord Jesus, creator of the universe, Savior of all. You are the only one worthy of worship. You are the holy God, and we lift up your name. We offer you praise for who you are. We are humbled by the magnitude of Jesus' sacrifice. And we are filled with joy and with hope from his glorious resurrection. Lord, we have come to learn, to grow deeper in knowledge, and to grow closer to you. Please take this time we have invested and use it to your glory. Use us, Lord. Help us to share your love and truth with our world. Help us to take the risk of conversing with others out of love and respect for mankind. Thank you for what you have already done and what you are going to do. In the most glorious name of our Lord Jesus Christ, amen.